Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Transit Tuesday talk from Transportation Riders United. We are thrilled today to be joined by Ben Stupka, the director of the Regional Transit Authority, the RTA for Southeast Michigan. Um, Ben has been at this a long time, has a ton of expertise. We are really thrilled to have him share more about what the RTA is doing, including running the QLINE these days, as well as DAX and D2A2, and so much more. So thanks everyone for joining. Please put your questions in the Q&A after we hear from Ben. We will take some questions and some discussion, and then I've got some updates on what's happening on True's front. So thanks so much for coming out.
We have a four county region: Washtenaw, Wayne, Macomb, and Oakland. We have three large transit providers: DDOT, Smart, and AAATA in Ann Arbor. We have two smaller rail providers: the People Mover and the QLINE, which we now own and operate. But in addition to that, there's dozens of smaller community level providers in areas like Wixom, Highland, Orion Township, Richmond, Chelsea, et cetera, kind of right at the edges of our fixed route system. And what we've seen over the last several years is those community providers have really grown in terms of not only their service area, but the amount of riders that they're picking up, particularly in Oakland County, we've seen that, but also in Macomb. So that's something we're really spending a lot of this year doing some planning around, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple extra slides. Oops, sure this is working. So RTA went through a process of getting a rebrand, a new logo, and coming up with a mission that is actually one sentence. I think our last one was like one sentence, but it was a bunch of commas and other things. So our new mission, vision, and values. So create new and better ways to move and connect people. Our vision is a Southeast Michigan where advances in transit create greater prosperity for all. Our values are creativity, empathy, and opportunity. So these are the driving forces behind what it is we're doing as an agency to bring about improvements in our public transit and overall mobility system. Our role, we do have kind of a core business role, but really what we are, we're transit subject matter experts. We're kind of digging deep into the nuts and bolts of policy and planning and trying to come up with new solutions to close some of the regional transit gaps. We're drivers and doers. We have generate new ideas. We test them. We pilot them. We have several pilots that are active right now that are very successful. And we're community connectors. We bring together citizens and governments and businesses to solve problems and to create opportunities. So that's really what it is we're doing. Some of the key programs that we're responsible for is the QLINE streetcar, the D2A2 Ann Arbor to Detroit Express bus, the DAX Detroit to Airport Express bus, the Mobility for All program, which is a planning and funding program that focuses on those community providers. We have about $5 million a year that we do grants for those community providers through that program. And the My Ride 2 program, which is a partnership with, it used to be the Area Agency on Aging, now called AgeWays, which is a call center and website that anybody in the region can call to get information about any kind of mobility needs they have. This is mainly focused on seniors and people with disabilities, but they're doing about 5,000 calls a year through that program. So where do we get all these ideas? We have changed over the way we're doing our master plan to make it an annual plan that really seeks to capture the region's transit goals and identifies specific strategies for us to move forward. Um, it's really a long list of things that we want to do, but it helps us kind of pick and choose the things that we can advance depending on what funding is available, what partnerships are available. And it's something we update on a pretty regular basis. So we're trying to stay as fresh as possible in terms of what's being delivered, not only by our agency, but all of our provider partners. And we just finished an update of that in December, and we'll be doing another one. We're going to try and move it forward to more October. So we're going to do kind of a quick update to align it more to our October fiscal year. So how are we doing overall? So I think most folks are generally aware of some of the gaps we have in the region, but it's always good to remind folks at a very high level. Gaps in frequency of service. So about 5% of the people in the region are connected to a frequent transit route. We have 36% of employment in the region has some type of transit connection. That could be an hour-long bus route. It could be a smart flex zone. That's actually grown by about 15% since Oakland County did their system expansion. So that number actually we're seeing tick up in a good direction, which is a good thing. What you see in front of you here is just a quick concept, just putting it's a tool that a planning tool that we use, but what you can see is someone who lives in Livonia right now not being able to necessarily access much of the transit system, and by simply adding two bus lines, you can access tens of thousands of more jobs and opportunities by just adding a few bus lines. So that's just some of the simple things that we can do to just create a better and more connected system. So it in our master plan, we have three different categories that we go through. The first one is moving people. So what are some of the programs and projects underway that are helping us move people across the region? So we have D2A2 and DAX, the fast routes, which we helped put together with DDOT and SMART. Washtenaw has a new express route on their corridor, and then we're working on our Mobility for All funding plan. And what does the region need? We need an expansion of transit services into job-rich areas, Western Wayne County, Macomb County manufacturing, more express connections, things like D2A2, potentially using other corridors, um, looking at potentially expanded airport express services, building on our DAX service, overall improved frequency, span, and availability of service, and more investments in our community services. So some other major gaps is we don't have a lot of major investments in terms of corridor projects, rail projects, and things like that. There's almost 60 projects, and actually this is probably a little outdated. There's probably more than 60 projects in the federal government's pipeline for funding. Every major city in the Great Lakes region has built or has funding programmed for a BRT project. Now we'll see how that funding lasts over the next year or so as we're monitoring what's happening at the federal level. But a lot of other regions have been very creative in being able to put forward projects to secure funding from this program. So for strengthening access, we now own and operate the streetcars, so we're looking at ways to make improvements to that service. We're developing what we're calling a Thriving Communities program. So this is looking at all the major regional transit routes, specifically Woodward, Michigan, Gratiot, and Washtenaw, where MDOT has done or is doing large corridor studies and figuring out a way for us to work together as a region to hopefully secure additional funding for those corridors. And then we are developing a program called Access to Transit. So this is a program that will allow the RTA to work with local communities to make investments at the bus stop level. So this is, better sidewalks, better crosswalks, better bike routes, bike parking, shelters, looking at some major regional transit hubs, transfer points, and just seeing are there things we can do to just make that a better and safer experience. So we have $2 million available to invest in that this year. We've secured thus far another $1 million a year from 2027 through 2029 to continue building that program. We want to see if we can get some match dollars for it. But the idea here is that we build up an annual program just to start going out and making these investments and making these improvements. And we want to continue to make those improvements in major corridors. We do want to look at what we can do to enhance existing rail systems, so not just the QLINE, but also working with the people mover, and really looking at regional bus stops and mobility hubs. So other big major gap is integration. So you'll see all the logos, and that's not even half of them of all the things that we have going on. And then the other example is Kansas City, who's got kind of this uniform Ride KC brand for everything from their streetcar to their bus system to their bike share to their paratransit system, and across a couple of communities. We have made a lot of improvements with fares and transfers over the last several years, but we really need to take another hard look at customer information, branding, route design. Are there other things we can do to really get back to some of the roots of the RTA when we started, which is looking at areas for better integration and coordination? So that's something that's big on our agenda for this year. A few other things we're looking at. We know we have the Dart Mobility payment platform and the Token Transit app, the Smart Flex on-demand service, battery electric bus pilots. Smart and DDOT have those. Hydrogen pilots, DDOT and AAATA have those. I will say that there is some very real risk of some of that funding, particularly the newer funding, being clawed back at the federal level. So that's something we have our eye on. We are doing a mobility wallet pilot. This will be an pilot app to allow people to pay for multiple mobility services, but it also allows for people to subsidize multiple mobility services. So if you have an account in the wallet, let's just say $100, you can use that $100 to pay for multiple mobility services. You can also have that $100 put in there by an employer, a social work program, a United Way program, any number of things. So we're just about, we just signed the contract for that. So we should be launching that pilot in the next couple of months. But continuing to expand those on-demand options, looking at alternative fuel technology, and really seeing if we can push towards some kind of unified travel information and payment app. So we're starting to kind of build our way back towards that. And of course, be remiss to not talk about funding because that's the biggest issue we have. And I think everyone on this call understands that. We've had some success with Oakland County going all in. The Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti area passed a large millage increase. Wayne County's, really looking to plan for a 2026 all-in ballot initiative. So those are all very positive things. We are having state legislative discussions. We talked a little bit about this earlier, looking at the road funding packages, and just hoping that some of that local bus operating money and potentially money for larger economic development projects can come out of that package. Needing to get more federal grant fund match for federal grant funds, looking at different types of funding options beyond kind of the traditional stuff. Are there other corridor financing districts, other things that we can do to start kind of building up different projects and building the system a piece at a time. But ultimately, we do need to look at long-term sustainable funding and figure out the best way to go about securing that. So what do we do next? Does that work? Yep. So sorry, someone's going to my office. So our new tagline is get on board with the RTA. So we want to continue to champion ongoing improvements and successes, support a transit positive state legislative agenda, and also say federal agenda, although I think that's going to be more of a challenge. We're really working on what we're calling the integration or coordination agenda. So what are the things, the kind of the core things that we can get back to that will really help the coordination of the systems overall, and then looking for new funding tools and pathways. Overall, we're really in the process of formalizing some of our pilots, so DTOA2 and DAX in particular, and finding longer term funding availability for those pilots. So we're also going to be looking for what's next. What's the next thing that we can take on to help to continue to improve transit in the region. So I think we'll be thinking a lot about that this year and trying to come up with some new initiatives and things that we can build on going forward. And that's it. Happy to discuss.
All right.
Yeah.
That's it, as if there weren't 84 different things you've got going
Yeah.
that you summarize in 10 minutes. No, I think that's great. I really like the tightened up mission, vision, values. Ultimately, it's up to some of these core pieces about ensuring yeah, moving people, and that. Um, I was wondering if you can say a little bit more about some of the ways that you guys are moving people, about the D2A2 index. Both, I believe I've seen like ridership is
Mhm.
pretty steadily going up. The more people find out about it, the more they ride it.
Yep.
And then so you said you are looking at ways to figure out long-term funding since they're both pilots. Can you say a little
Yep.
bit more about
Absolutely.
how those are going?
Yeah, so D2A2 is going really, really well. That is, we're in our just past our third year or into our third year. And every month is, this January was more than this January's ridership was more than last January's ridership was more than last January's ridership. It just keeps, we're starting to come last January or last year, I think we had about a 45% increase overall. So I think this year, I think this year will be closer to like the 15-20%, but even that's amazing. And I think, we saw it before the pandemic when we launched the reflex service that became the fast service. When you put quality service out there, people ride it, and it doesn't have to be the fanciest. I mean, I think Dax is very nice, and I think Fast is
Yes,
very nice, but it doesn't have to be the fanciest thing in the world. If it's quality service and it comes on time and it meets a need that hasn't been met before, people ride it.
absolutely.
So that's been going really well. Um, we were able to, well, let me talk about Dax and I'll talk about the funding part.
Yeah.
Dax, we're coming up on our first anniversary next week, I think.
Okay.
So uh, that one has been, we spiked up to
Well,
about 4,000 riders a month, and then it's been a little flat.
okay.
So we are going to do a ridership survey. So folks who are DAX riders, be on the lookout for that. That should start end of this month, early April. So just getting a better sense of who's riding, why they're riding, what they value. We're going to be, we are looking at a potential park and ride partnership downtown that's been a little bit more challenging to put together than we had anticipated, but
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I think would help because it is an airport service. So we're going to look at piloting that.
Hmm.
We did extend the pilot till September. I should have started there. So the pilot is extended till September to give us some time to do this. We're looking to bring on a different team to do a we're calling a marketing booster. So just to kind of just put some more money into marketing. What can we do to kind of get out there and talk to folks? And we will be doing analysis of the travel market itself. It is a complicated market, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're trying to get people that don't really even know the region to come to use the bus, and it's it'll take some time. So we'll be doing all that probably in the next 2 quarters between basically now and September. And then we'll go to our board and we did the same with D2A2 and say, hey, do you want us to keep doing this and keep building on it? And for both of those, we have reserved some remaining ARPA dollars that we have to be able to
Hmm.
extend those for another several years potentially.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
that is, yeah. So we feel, as long we've made that funding as safe as protected as it can be, but the rules are not, I think to this group, I can say the rules are not the same as they always have been. So, but barring that, we should
Hmm.
be able to preserve funding for those for several years. It's not a
Right.
long-term solution, but I think it gets us in the right direction.
Is the uh given how much of the DAC service is a benefit for people coming into the region, do you have any funding or collaboration with the Tourism Bureau or with the convention? I know some of the QLINE funds are coming from tourism dollars. Is there
Yep.
a way for DACs?
I think there's an opportunity to have that conversation for sure.
Okay.
It's definitely on my mind. We haven't had any formal conversations about it. We have had a lot of conversations with them, and I think one of the things you'll see in the updated marketing is really, and we've done a lot of this, but like highlighting it for events,
Yeah.
making sure if there's a large convention in town that when the Visit Detroit is marketing to that convention, that we're getting information not only about DAX but QLINE and People Mover and
Yeah.
other transit options and we're building that and they're very proactive there. So that's kind of where we're at now, but I
Great.
do agree that there's an opportunity to to grow the opportunities. Let's put
Yes.
that. Yeah.
To what extent are the vehicles on decks or D2A2 accessible if people have various disabilities?
They're yeah, they are 100% accessible.
Okay.
They're EDA compliant in every way. So yeah.
Can wheelchairs, there are wheel able to get wheelchairs on those? Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
Yep, yep.
Um, I guess I should know they helped us
Mhm.
the D2 I mean Indian Trails helped us bring a busload of folks up to the Capitol last week and
Yeah,
including some folks in wheelchairs, but wanted to make sure that was a question that was brought
yep.
up.
It's
Um,
come up a couple times, but yes, absolutely. Yep.
yeah, I think it's and that's great for people to know that that is an option. You had also talked a lot about, or you talked at some point about some of the different routes trying to improve frequency on, moving towards rapid transit.
Mhm.
Marguerite had asked about Grand River. Are there any plans to make
Yeah.
enhancements on Grand River?
So we're trying to relook at Grand River. So three routes that we haven't looked at very extensively, I would say.
Yeah.
One is Grand River, one is Van Dyke, and one is Ford. Like we
Okay.
really haven't really looked extensively at those. So part of this program that we're calling Thriving Communities is to really look at all those corridors and get a sense of what services can go, what makes sense in those corridors, what we can do going forward. Um, I will say, looking at and I'm sure you're going to have someone from Smart come in and talk about smarter mobility, but it does look like they're upgrading a couple of those corridors as well. And particularly, I think Van Dyke and Mound in Macomb County, which I think is, no pun intended, is smart. I think you're going to get a lot more ridership out of that part of Macomb,
Yeah.
uh, than others. So, yep.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. That at least Van Dyke and Fort are on the plan for Smart to make some improvements on, and I believe DDOT is at least upgrading the frequency of their Grand River service in
Yep.
their next improvement. So again, bit by bit.
Yep. Yeah.
The I know some people have definitely followed what's going on with the QLINE and you guys. But for those who are not as familiar,
Sure.
can you share a little bit about kind of the history and the changes at QLINE and what people will be experiencing as riders or not?
Sure, sure, sure. I'll do it briefly as possible. The Q line was opened in 2017. It was operated as a nonprofit with a private provider, who was managing basically the entire system. That stayed in place till COVID, shut down during COVID. It came back as still a nonprofit, but it had a completely in-house staff. So no more private provider, totally in-house staff. So that was 2021, 22 when they came back online, 22 really. The the last year, so 2024, they transitioned to the RTA, so now they are a fully public transit provider. So what this does for the Q line, just baseline as a service, is it provides them access to much more sustainable funding. So we have a very solid funding program for the Q line for at least the next 15 years. And a lot of those funding sources, I think, are things that are going to be fairly easily renewable, on an ongoing basis. So there's some state funding involved. There's some federal funding. A lot of it is from the convention funds. We have a little bit of money from the DDA, the Downtown Detroit, yeah, DEGC, DDA, whatever their name is. In addition to that, this is a little bit in the weeds, but just so folks kind of, if they see the Q line, they understand. We also have an agreement with MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. They are wrapping the Q line. So you'll see out there, right now out there, there's kind of an innovation themed wrap on all the Q lines. We'll probably move to like a pure Michigan type vibe more in the summer. That actually relieved the Q line of some debt service and loans that they owed to the state for actually building the service. So that was another thing that just kind of eased the financial burden. So, a very stable, in public transit world, very stable funding program for the Q line. So that was thing one. Thing two is we're only 5 months into it, so really it's just kind of learning how it operates and what we can do. Um, I'd say it was pretty smooth the first couple of months. The winter has been interesting. The snow is interesting. We definitely had a lot of delays and a lot of issues and blockages when we had the large snowstorms a few right around kind of Valentine's Day type time. Um, but I think not that the previous nonprofit and their leadership couldn't do this, but I believe we'll have a lot more success and ability to work with the city, work with other departments to say, hey, if we have this many blockages in a 10-day period, like we have to be able to do better than this because that's really, we can't control that. We can do the best we can, but that's a coordination issue. So those are some of the things we're attacking right now. And then we'll kind of go from there. I won't bore you with there's a whole bunch of back end making sure financial systems are working and blah 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 that I probably spent too much time worrying about, but it's important.
We
Uh,
really appreciate that you're able to worry about
yeah.
them, so we don't have
Yeah.
to.
But yeah, happy to answer more questions than that. I guess
Yeah.
I would just also say, so buoyed by the draft, the NFL draft last year, the QLINE has had 2 years of over 1 million riders, record ridership last year. Um, Probably won't hit that number this year because we don't have a draft. But we're shooting for over 1 million again, hopefully 1.1. So we're still going to be pushing, really hard to keep that ridership number high, and try and push it even higher.
Yeah.
And I would say you're going to start seeing a lot more. We're going to do a big event around opening day. You're going to start seeing a lot more aggressive marketing and things like that. We do want to look at some other park and ride opportunities. So we're kind of just looking where can we build out a little bit at a time before we take on what I'm sure people have as bigger questions?
Yes, that I will say
Yeah.
there have been at least two questions that came in terms of expansion.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, in terms of what would I'll frame it as what would
Yeah.
it take to expand? And the questions that were posed were either extending to 8 Mile, Royal Oak, Pontiac. I've also thought that extending uh, from the downtown along Jefferson or along Michigan Ave
Yep.
had a lot of potential, but I know that that's a huge undertaking. Can
Yeah.
you
Yeah. So
explain a little bit more about what
sure.
it would take to do some sort of expansion?
Sure. So, well, what my old boss used to always say, you can do anything with money and time. So not to be glib, but that's what it is. But really, I think what we're going to be working on with the board is you know how do we put some realistic options out there. What can we realistically do as an expansion. And I would say the edges of realistic, right? So looking at the ones you mentioned, I think are Jefferson, and taking advantage of what's going to be happening on the riverfront with whatever happens out of the Rensen conversation. Certainly Michigan Avenue, or connecting out towards Michigan Central and the new soccer stadium, even Grand Boulevard, which is just down the street. I'm in the QLINE headquarters right now, which is just down the street with everything that's going on at Henry Ford. Um, those types of expansions, and even being able, if you could imagine, like a connection from Henry Ford down Woodward to the new Rensen or 375, like is it a fully realized regional transit the way we'd want it? Probably not. But is it a very powerful economic development tool that is also a great transit connection? Yes. So I think those are the types of things we're just starting to think about. And we'll start formalizing a little bit more as we get further into kind of understanding how the service works and what the possibilities are. I'd say the only other thing for folks who care. It is you know streetcar parts don't come from Napa Auto Parts. So that has been an interesting. I knew that beforehand, but it's the streetcars themselves are fairly unique vehicles. There's only, I think, five other properties in the United States that have the exact same cars that we do. So there's only like 30 of them, 35 of them in the United States. So if when things break, it's tough to get a new part. And as you guys, I mean, we're all watching the news and looking at, you know, international trade implications and tariffs and supply chain. And I think we all understand the impacts that that's had since COVID. Um, so, so that's another part of this that we're just kind of learning and trying to instill a little bit more longer term planning into like, okay, hey, if the brakes are going to wear out, we know they're going to wear out 2 years from now. We're going to have to start ordering them like now, literally
Oof.
now.
Yeah.
So a little more in the weeds, but
Yeah.
that's the type
No,
of stuff we,
we have heard of some of that with
yeah,
certainly with the bus agencies that
yeah,
um, they've
it's,
they've ordered them. They
yep.
have
There's only
another
two bus
whatever 50 buses
manufacturers.
coming, but it's gonna
Yeah.
take 2 years. So
There's
they're
two bus manufacturers in the United States. I mean,
yeah,
that's, well, that's a whole nother. Yeah.
I know, I know.
Yeah.
Um, the
Yeah.
so yeah, you I think I'm safe to say you would love to, again, if there was
Mhm.
lots of money, to be
Yeah.
able to expand the service. Right now,
Yeah.
we're working on very limited resources. You showed the
Yeah.
graph.
Yeah.
As long as the Metro Detroit area spends a third as much on transit as most major metro regions,
Yeah.
we're not going to have grand and glorious things.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
we will always be working to turn that around,
Yes.
but
Yes.
um, the uh, and I guess the other piece I would mention is uh, for someone who suggested all the way to Pontiac, um, the streetcar is actually kind of slow. So
Mhm.
the streetcar queue line would not be the best mechanism to travel all the way to Royal Oak or Pontiac. The reasons we're talking about more like Grand Boulevard or Jefferson or something, it is a special, different types of transit are
Mhm.
effective in different circumstances. And a streetcar is designed for relatively modest distances that have a lot of density and a lot of destinations and a lot of people moving around. So, um, uh, I'll add in my own question, sort of building off of that. I know MDOT has started um, I don't know if it's a corridor analysis for Woodward Avenue.
Mhm.
To what extent are you guys involved in that? Do you have any? And I know that since before RTA existed, there have been
Yeah.
studies of how to improve
Yep.
rapid transit on
Yes.
Woodward, and I was pleased that they took a bunch of your studies and are
Yes. Yep.
building off of those. Can you say anything about what is involved there and what your role is, what you might see?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. And it is MDOT study, and I would,
Yeah,
so I don't want to, they just got underway. I think they had a community engagement started maybe a couple weeks ago.
a couple weeks ago,
I think they had
yeah.
their first meeting. So we are involved. We're on the steering committee. We helped them put the project together. We, helped kind of even put some of the RFP ideas together, to be able to select the team to help do the plan. So far it's been a very open process. I think what they're shooting for is getting kind of a big list of projects they can do, knowing that tearing up and rebuilding the entirety of Woodward is probably not going to happen. But also knowing that the communities along Woodward and the Regional Transit Authority and others have done planning and have desires to do different things along Woodward. So we're very involved with those. We've been fairly deeply involved with most of the studies that have been going on. So the Gratiot study just ended. Michigan Avenue, they're moving into design. Washtenaw out in Ann Arbor. So we're pretty deeply involved in all those, and that's part of what we want to be able to do is say, okay, if MDOT is as the owner of the road is developing a study that says people want better transit, that's great. How do we do that together? And how do we make it part of modernizing the infrastructure? How do we, God forbid, make it a road project?
Yeah.
Just
I
saying.
mean, roads actually serve more than cars. Did you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
no, I think that's neat. I posted a little more info on that, and there is a survey.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and again, they are trying to look. I like that they're trying to take all the pieces and look at
Mhm.
what do people want to see on different sets of sections of Woodward and what's possible. So, um, another question that came in, you mentioned the I-75 HOV lanes. Could you speak more
Mhm.
about the about freeway corridor express buses? What kind of format could there be? Either park and ride? How would they differ from something like the Smarts 800 series park and ride? Is
Yep.
that,
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think right now we're starting to wind our way towards, maybe at least some kind of study to get a better look to answer those questions more
yeah,
more accurately. Um, I do think it's a missing opportunity that we really haven't looked into deeply enough, and I'm, again, kind of buoyed, maybe falsely so, by the success of D2A2, and maybe other corridors wouldn't work as well because there's different dynamics there, but. I do think it's something we need to look into more deeply. Most likely we would have it look like a D2A2 type service, so that's a little bit different than the smart services. Probably different vehicles, possibly different, operating. So not just peak hours, but more like of an all day type service, or at least most of the day type service. Um, so that's we're looking, we're going to take a look at that. I think there's lots of opportunities. I guess I'll just say this. The fact that we have an HOV lane I-75, we're not running any buses in it, just drives me like nuts. Like I can't. I can't stand it. So,
someone was telling me recently
yeah,
about how other, forgetting what region it was, but how they've had great success with sort of a bus on shoulder.
yep.
Um,
So,
that if when
yeah.
things get when traffic gets
Hmm.
busy, the bus can zip
Yep.
right around.
So, Minneapolis has a really
Okay.
successful bus on shoulder highway based program, along with, obviously other
Yeah.
pieces of the Chicago area has a pretty robust program, and then actually the state of Colorado has a really interesting
Mm.
program that integrates not only regional express bus but also bigger inner city connections. And then they and actually the Seattle area have also started building. Um, Bus infrastructure on their highways.
Yeah.
So, so where people can kind of get on and off, and they can get to the access like a park and ride, but the actual stop is in the in protected, but in the middle of the highway. So think folks who've been to Chicago and gotten on and off a blue line or an orange line stop like that, but
Mm.
express buses. We're starting to see those crop up in a couple of different
Okay.
regions.
That gives a little bit more flexibility. It can
Yep,
zip through, but then it can
flexibility,
also get
speed.
off and
Yep, and it allows more strategic park and ride access. So the bus doesn't have to get off, all those things. So, and I would say the Colorado program for anybody who's interested is called Bus Tang, Bus Tang,
yes.
which but hey, I remembered it. So if anyone's interested, they've been developing it for the last like 5 years, and it's pretty robust. I mean, they have lots of different brands and things going on there, so pretty cool.
Um, A question on does RTA monitor the number of passengers who use Amtrak or intercity buses like Greyhound or Flix to travel within Southeast Michigan? Clark mentioned that Amtrak's the only carrier offering a one-seat ride between Oakland and Wayne with Washtenaw counties. Um, and since so many people travel between Ann Arbor and Chicago, there's always empty seats between Oakland County and Ann Arbor. Could those be filled using the right fare structure and marketing? Is that something that you're
I think it's
following
something
or
for us.
working on?
It's something I've definitely had some conversations about the fare structure side of things. A few
Okay.
light conversations, nothing. It's been an idea we've kind of knocked around. We haven't really monitored the ridership in a while, and I think
Okay.
that's a good maybe every year we kind of look at the D2A2 service. The last time we looked at it more in terms of the highway travel, like cars travel market, but I think
Yeah.
next time we do it, we'll look at the rail market as well. I think it's a good idea. It's easy enough for us to add that in and just kind of get a sense of it.
But that is a nice idea, just to the extent
Mhm.
that there are, it's not frequent enough, but that there
Yeah.
are trains going from Ann Arbor to Oakland County.
Mhm.
And if this pricing were a little bit more manageable, And if is that something the RTA could explore, how to, again, add yet another layer to our
Yes.
transportation network.
Yeah.
Um, the There was also a question in terms of what's going on with Amtrak. I don't know if there was anything particular, but
Yeah.
is there anything that you can I know that I know that there's been some discussion about, and I don't know what to what extent you've been a part of it, the Michigan Central and whether the that could start train service again. Is there anything else you can share about
Yeah,
Amtrak or those such?
yeah, I would say it's not, it's definitely, I've been, again, involved in some conversations. It's not really part of our daily work
Okay.
program. I
Yeah.
will say there is absolutely an active conversation about, is this possible? There's been conversations about even connecting across to Canada, maybe
Yeah.
a little more delayed now.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, so that's out there, but it's not necessarily something we're on like on a daily basis, but definitely
Okay.
conversations out there. Um, yeah.
Um, okay. Another question, um, more directly related to your Joseph was noting that they ride D2A2 frequently, but it's not well coordinated with the AATA buses, that
Mhm.
they sometimes leave like moments before the D2A2 arrives. Has there been any consideration of communicating or trying to coordinate with D2A2 um, on with with AATA about the D2A2 schedule?
We can definitely work with them. I mean, Tripoli the ride helped us start D2A2.
Yeah,
I mean, we stopped right at their transit center, so I think that there's absolutely an opportunity to see if there's anything we can do or communicate to make it a little smoother. I mean, it's always tricky because we're different
yeah,
markets and all those other things, but yeah, I mean, they're absolutely have been a great partner. The D2A2 would not exist without them.
yeah.
Period. So I think that's something we can talk to them about for sure.
Quick side note, apologies about the Q or the M1 Woodward project link. It looks like their survey is closed for now.
Mm.
Said the public was asked to provide feedback. There will be additional opportunities in the future, but they took input for a little while. They are analyzing it and stay tuned for more. So apologies that I posted a link that didn't work. Um, and yes, if folks are interested in Amtrak or other or the areas of that, Mary Jo noted MARP, the Michigan Association of Rail Passengers, has a meeting this Saturday at the Dearborn Amtrak at 2 o'clock. So that'll be a great opportunity to get a whole lot more of those uh, Amtrak and rail related questions answered, is to go to the MARP meeting. Um, I think there was one other question. Uh, oh, in terms of payment options, I know that's less your direct area, but in terms of the extent you coordinate, is there any effort to build a tap to pay option like in New York City? You can just tap your credit card or Apple Pay and not have to fumble with any app. Um, are there
So
considerations of that?
yeah, we've been trying to kind of reignite those conversations. So those are th that was those are things we talked about several years ago, and that's a good example of where I kind of talked about earlier. Some of the coordination items that we really had on the agenda before, we've gotten partway there. We've made some good progress, right? I mean, the fact that and fair payment being a good example that Smart and DDOT are basically aligned on fare policies, and we have a regional pass, and they have the same mobile ticketing app. Good, great first steps, but to get to the next step, we have to be able to do what are called valid. You need to basically have a card or validators to be able to scan them. Um, so we're definitely behind in that conversation. So I think we're going to be working with Smart and DDOT to figure out how do we start energizing that conversation again. I know our friends up in Lansing at CATA just recently implemented a new a whole new smart kind of smart ticketing system. So we've had a few conversations with their leadership about how they went about that process, and integrated a bunch of other things into it. But um, we're looking at that. We're taking a look at the transit app itself, and seeing if there's expansion opportunities with that app. We know that a good number of regular riders use that. There's ways to integrate mobile ticketing at least into that app. So we're having some conversations about, is that something we can do as well? And again, that just kind of gets us creeping up to what we want. But yeah, the validator is the thing that actually you can scan on. That's the next thing we have to be able to crack to do something like what New York City or London or these other communities have. Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks. I got uh,
Yeah.
dogs barking.
Yeah.
We are fostering a rescue dog who is
Oh.
uh but Margaret did also ask if what sort of non-emergency contact for the Q line if people have questions or concerns that aren't explicitly emergency, but what is the best way for someone to reach out to
Yeah.
QLINE?
Yep. I'm going to give the phone number
Okay.
right now.
Yeah.
It's actually the RTA's phone number.
Oh, okay. It would
So,
just go right to you guys. Okay.
yeah, 313-402-1020.
Okay.
So if you call that number, there's the what we have put together is there's a phone tree in there, and it's like
Okay.
one for QLINE, press two for, I can't remember the numbers exactly.
Yeah.
Press one for D282 or DAX, press two for QLINE, and that'll get you to where you need to be.
Okay. That's
And that's
great.
more the general line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If people have questions,
Hmm.
suggestions,
Yeah.
concerns. All right. Yeah, Marguerite, I'll see if I can email that over to you as the uh uh other questions. And this might be again, there's a lot of things there's a set of things you guys actually do and a lot of things that you're following, touching on, helping,
Yes.
coordinating.
Yes. Yeah.
Clark was wondering about why not fill in the gap in bus service on Michigan Ave between, well, I assume that means sort of, yeah, between Detroit and Ann Arbor. There's a lot of, uh, the D2A2 is the express, but there's kind of a 5 mile gap between
Mhm.
where the Ann Arbor and the smart services go. What's
Yeah.
any
Well,
thoughts there?
luckily, our friends and leaders in Wayne County are engaging in an effort to work with those communities. In particular, Canton is the big one, but all those communities that are not opted in the transit system right now to determine if there's an appetite to develop those types of connections. Not only that connection, but everything, other parts of Western Wayne County, and hopefully that'll lead to a ballot initiative that will support that expansion of service. And we had a conversation. I had a conversation earlier today about that gap and working with the ride and figuring out, are there other ways to close it. So that's a very active conversation in that kind of in that Wayne County context.
And I think it's fair to say that because of the legislative change, tiny correction there. The next time the next time uh, funding is on the ballot in Wayne County, it will be the whole county.
Mhm.
That is so next year when they are voting, when Wayne County votes, it will be the entire county. So what service comes from that will be developed, will be, but I think that gap between Ann Arbor and I don't know if that's Westland,
Yeah.
is definitely a prime area. Um, all right. I guess I would ask, you've touched on a ton of stuff. You've got a lot of projects you guys are directly doing and then supporting so many other areas.
Mhm.
Um, what's coming up? What's next in
In
your
RTA
crystal
land.
ball? Yeah,
Um, So a couple on the more practical side of things.
sure.
So the next couple of months, we're just going through some of our funding actions. So this is part of our core, what I call our core business is distributing the federal and state funding to the transit providers. So that's the next few months. So just kind of, we just saw that there was a continuing resolution to extend the federal funding for till the end of this fiscal year. It looks like it's just a notch above what was last year,
But it's
which
continued.
it's continued. It's a notch above last year. Just that's fine. Let's just please don't hurt us. I have a brief side note on federal funding too, but I'll get to that in a second.
Sound good.
So that'll be the next few months. That will include our selection of grantees for our Mobility for All program. So these are the community providers. So that'll be probably April or May. Then we're going to really look at the Access to Transit program. So that's where we select and work with communities to start building out some of these pedestrian bike projects. We are going to, this is a little more in the planning nerdy category, so just bear with me. One of the things that we did after 2018 was we took a master plan that had a map that was like, this is what the transit system can look like. And we devolved it right into these are the things that we need to do to improve transit. And that's
Yeah.
been good. We've had a lot of success. And I think we can continue to have success with that model because we can kind of pick and choose and take on projects and just kind of where can we be of value. We're going to start moving back towards okay, if you take the Smarter Mobility Plan and DDOT's plan and AAATA's plan and Oakland County and Wayne County, and what does this actually look like now?
Nice.
Really, like what is this now?
Yeah.
And what do we want to, how do we, what is our kind of short term, say that over the next 5 years, if all those things kind of come together, what would it look like? What are we still missing? So we're going to be taking, and again, a little bit more on the planning nerdy side, but I think important for us to start getting back to what can the transit in this region look like, so that's a piece we'll be working on over this year. I feel like I'm forgetting something else, but that'll be the big piece of business, and continuing to learn the QLINE and figuring out what we can do to continue to help grow that service along with D282 and DAX.
Okay. You did note federal. We know that right
Yeah,
now anybody
yeah,
dealing with anything federal funding related,
yeah,
which you do for the whole region,
yeah,
that there's a lot of chaos.
yes,
What can you share with us about the
yep,
status of federal funding? What we are pretty sure is continuing, what we're
yep,
pretty sure
yep.
is not,
I'm
or
just
anything else?
pulling up my notes here. I want to make sure I say this
Yeah.
correct. So, okay. So just I believe earlier this week, the Congress approved. I don't believe it's signed yet, but Congress approved an extension of the transport. We call it THUD, it's the Transportation Appropriations Bill.
Okay.
Um, so
Oh, because it's
the
transportation, housing, and urban
urban
development.
development. Yeah, thud.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
So
There are worse
probably
acronyms.
bad marketing, bad acronym for that one, but whatever. That's what they call it. So that is approved through the end of the federal fiscal year. So that's the end of September. Um, it did improve a very small increase, like less than 1% over last year. Um, it left out about 5% of what was authorized. The
Mhm.
bulk of that was earmarks. They don't call them earmarks anymore.
Yeah.
Like they call them congressionally directed spending requests. I will say we had an earmark pending with Peter's office for $3 million to invest in the Q line and dedicated lanes and other things. So we did lose that, which is painful. It wasn't a surprise. I
Okay.
was not shocked, that happened. I kind of figured. But we're going to keep putting it in there and maybe it'll get through one cycle, just another way for us to kind of keep trying to do that. Um, Positives out of that is I think for folks who monitor federal stuff, the Infrastructure Act passed by the Biden administration increased baseline formula funding for transit by about 20%. So that increase still stayed through the continuing resolution. So
Okay.
that's good. That was my big fear is that they'll, I mean, it could be a lot worse. They'd at least slice that part out. So we'll see what happens going forward, but that's that's okay for now. So that's our bread and butter funding. So that's good. Um, on the competitive grant side. So again, people who are kind of watchers of these things know that there's a lot of competitive grants in a lot of really creative and interesting areas over the last several years. There was a US DOT guidance issued about 2 weeks ago that all competitive grants issued between fiscal year 22 and 25 uh, grants that don't have what we call a grant agreement and are not the term we use obligated. So basically, when you receive a grant, you have to go into the federal system. You have to do a bunch of paperwork to kind of secure that money. That's what we call obligated. If your grant is a competitive grant, so not a formula, a competitive grant, and it's not obligated, it will be reviewed, and I'm going to quote here, and this is, I think everybody who's listening knows this is not my opinion of anything, but they are looking for grants that are funding activities such as equity analysis, green infrastructure, bicycle infrastructure, EV or EV charging. So anything that is directly directly funding those activities or largely funding those activities, I think is going to be subject to a review and potentially a rescission. We're not
Yeah.
really sure. Um, we're working with our provider partners to identify if there are any grants that fall into that category. There's a couple of recent grants that DDOT and AAATA got that may end up in that area. So there's not really much we can do beyond at least try and identify them and say, hey, these are grants that were issued. And you know,
Are you in touch with congressional
yeah,
offices
we're
to try to fight
yeah,
for them?
Yeah, so we're trying to get together some information to be like, hey, this is the impact for
Yeah.
our transit providers and the projects they're doing. So that's where we're at. We'll see what that review yields.
Yeah.
But yeah, so not horrible news on one side, rough news on the other, and we'll see where it goes from there. I would say that the programs like programs that fund projects like BRT, small starts, those are going to be the ones that usually end up on the chopping block. Now, we don't have
Yeah.
any, kind of unfortunately, we don't have any funding from those programs, but
Yeah.
um, those usually end up on the chopping block. So I wouldn't be surprised to see those get whacked in the
Hmm.
next continuing resolution. So,
Okay. So a
yay.
mixed bag. So,
Yeah.
well, there's a lot of chaos. At least some of that
Yep.
ongoing funding
Yep.
um is ongoing. Some of that
Yeah, and that's the
um
big fear.
formula that formula
Yep,
funding.
formula
Okay.
funding is staying pretty steady,
At
and
least for the next whatever 10 months or
exactly. So we'll see where it goes. I think folks can look at different things like Project 2025 and see the playbook and all those things. So the playbook is a lot worse than what is happening right now for formula grants. So yeah. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And while I know you can't, I will say if you haven't called your Congress members to make sure that they are fighting in every way, shape they can to defend transit funding and other important federal funding, then please do so because they need to hear it. They need that they're our best avenue of fighting back. So okay, so at this point, the that $3 million for QLINE
Yep.
is we is lost at this point.
Yep. We're gonna put another one in for next year. We're just gonna
Okay.
keep at it, and
Yeah.
then and just like everything else we try and do, right? And well, okay, if we can't get that, what can we do
Yeah.
to fill in the gaps and just keep making the best improvements we can?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, a um, and of course, we couldn't have this discussion without asking about where things are in terms of a ballot question. Joseph asked, curious about the feasibility of another RTA ballot question in 26 or 28. Would the option of raising funds through a vehicle registration fees rather than property taxes be more palatable? What discussions are underway?
I would say right now our focus is on supporting Wayne County's efforts.
Okay.
And then I think we have to really understand the landscape after that. One of the things that will be at least partially solved is transit being, all in across at least the major part of
Yeah.
the region. So Western Washtenaw still won't be part of it, but the big part of it will have solved, at least partially solved that big issue. So I think we do have to do some reconsideration of what would a ballot ask look like.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay. Um, and I know that right now the only options are the vehicle registration
Yeah.
or property tax, neither of which
Yep.
are ideal.
Yep.
Vehicle registration doesn't, if I recall from previous discussions, doesn't raise
The-
as much money, and
yeah.
it's a you got to pay it all at once, so people
Yep.
don't necessarily like it.
Yep. Yeah. It's a one time payment. Last time we did the math, it was something, it was around $100 million a year, which is
Okay,
not.
which is nice, which
Yeah,
is
I mean,
helpful.
we could make some waves with $100 million a year. So don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but it's not. And property tax isn't that much more.
Mm,
They're, and I think folks who are pay attention know that we don't have the option to do sales taxes here in the state of Michigan, and that ultimately is a huge crutch for us, or barrier. I don't want to call it a crutch
yeah.
because it's something
Crutch
that
sounds
helps you.
helpful.
Not
No,
a
it's
crutch.
a
Yeah. It's like someone kicking a crutch out from under you. So, so that's something we're going to continue to talk to people about. We know it's a constitutional amendment. It's a big deal, but it's as you start to talk to people and even broaden the conversation out to talk about roads or talk about parks or talk about libraries or talk about any other thing that we want to invest in at a regional or local level, not having
yeah,
that tool in our toolbox, just period. Like transit just being part of that conversation is just limiting. And then what happens is the state ends up having to put more and more money into transit and into roads and talking about road funding packages, and we have a giant tool in our toolbox that we're just not using, or we should
yeah,
have in our toolbox. And it just,
yeah.
so hopefully people start to see that. But again, it takes a constitutional amendment. So that's,
It's a pretty heavy
yeah,
lift.
pretty heavy.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so, um, are there things that you think we ought to know that you haven't shared, or any final closing thoughts from you, Ben?
Um, No, I want to thank you. I want to thank the true community and people who've sat in and listened tonight and continue to advocate for better transit and go to the legislature and talk to your Congress people. We don't always get the opportunity to do that. For legal reasons and other reasons. We do the best we can, and we do have our own kind of legislative program, and we do education and meet with legislators. But just really want to thanks folks, and keep pushing, keep helping us celebrate the small victories. I know that can be difficult. I've been at this for a while now, and is everything drawn out the way I wanted to? No. But we have had some successes. We can continue to build on those successes. Just kind of keep at it, and we will get where we need to be eventually. But just want to thank everybody for everything you do. Again, Megan, you do and your group does. It's great to have advocates that are helping to kind of push these conversations along. So
It is
that's all.
definitely nice to have such a strong community
Mhm.
of folks, both great leaders at the agencies like yourself and others. Oh, and John reminds us,
Don.
Happy Transit
Oh my
Employee
God. Thank you,
Appreciation
Don.
Day,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
we should give a thank you certainly to you, Ben, but then also to all of the bus
Yes.
drivers and mechanics and to planners and cleaning crew and everybody
Yeah.
who makes that transit service work. Did I hear at some point that we have over 2,000 transit employees in Southeast Michigan.
I think that's about right. And just a side note, I've been kind of trying to talk with my staff. I was like, that's a pretty good employee base. Like we should talk
Yeah.
about that in and of itself. We've never really expressed that way, and I was like, that's another different way for
Yeah.
us to think about economic development, stability, good jobs, all those things. So
Oh,
yeah,
it looks like we
yeah,
do want to sneak one more question in
sure,
before we let you go and before I do a few final remarks.
yep.
Justin had asked about Genfare fare
Mhm.
boxes. Do they have the capability for open payment? Mobile ticketing can be done with the transit app. Have you
Uh,
get
Yeah, I'm not a super duper deep Gen Fair transit
okay,
fare box expert, but I will say that my general understanding is that yes, pretty much any modern fare box at the very least can integrate with a validator, and most of
okay,
them have that technology already built in. A lot of other transit properties throughout the United States have basically done lighter versions of Farebox upgrades and
mm,
then moved to validators. And we call that open. We call it open architecture is kind of the term we use. So you have a choice when you're replacing your fare boxes. Do you get like super high end fare boxes that do everything, or do you got to kind of get basic fare boxes that basically do cash and then have a validator and other things? And depending on your side of it's a whatever a national debate about that, but I'll also say that there's just like bus manufacturers. We talked about this earlier. I believe there's only two fare box manufacturers in the United States. So it's just if anybody gets has some capital to put together to be a bus manufacturer or a fare box manufacturer, there's plenty of need out there. Just saying.
yes,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Not exactly a high quantity, but a huge need.
Yes.
Um, Well, thank you again, Ben, for everything you do. Yeah, you and I have both been at this a long time, and it's
Ma'am.
not
Yeah.
we're not exactly where we thought we would be, but there has certainly been huge progress, both
Yeah. I could put together a
expansion.
good list. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. When you look back, oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we have made some really good steps.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Yep.
we'll keep it going. I
Yep.
do want to
Thanks,
take
man.
a moment before everyone else hops off to share a quick reminder, True is, because the transit community is growing, True is working to do more events, and I want to make sure everyone is aware. Um, I'd encourage folks to if you haven't in a while, take a look at our website, detroittransit.org. And we have some great information. It's both a great place to go to find out about things like events like this, about what's happening on the Double DDOT campaign, uh, and about things that are happening on the state budget level. But then we also have an events calendar. So oop, that seems to be doubling up a little bit. But it's the whole Detroit area transit public meetings that are happening. Certainly uh, Ben's meeting with his RTA board and NOTA, the North Oakland Transit is having meetings, DDOT community meetings. So you can find out about lots of different public events that are coming up, and ways that you can be involved. I would, yeah, for some reason, the third Thursday is always the busiest, like all the transit events. But I wanted to flag a few, as Mary Jo noted. MARP is having an event Saturday at the Dearborn Transit Center. Oops, need to correct this one. True's trying to set up just some basic social events. We should just get together. There are a lot of people who want to talk transit. So it's going to be March 25th. I need to correct this. At Z's Villa, right near the Tech Town office. We're going to do a transit on tap happy hour. Come out and talk transit. And then I believe the mayor's going to do his final state of the city address, so we can even watch that together. If you have ideas for other social events, places we should go to bring the transit community together, please let us know. Always open to new ideas. And then we also have, gosh, okay, I'll have to figure out why it's duplicating some of these. Um, but we got uh darn it. I'm having trouble pulling him up. Z, were there any other? Oh, yes. Thank you, Paul. SMART has a series of public meetings coming up. We are going to be, it's tentative yet. We may be doing next Transit Tuesdays, probably April 15th with SMART. But they also have public meetings coming up April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. A great opportunity to dig in and learn more about um, the 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 pathway that Smart is looking to improve and expand. And I got to say, I'm excited that they've got plans for things like a Hamtramck route and connecting Van Dyke all the way down into Hamtramck and making some more improvements and enhancements. But each one of you should dig into that smarter mobility plan as well. So lots of opportunities to get involved. There's a lot happening on in regards to the Detroit city budget, in regards to the state budget, and with SMART and DDOT. So a busy time on transit, but thanks everyone for taking the time tonight. Stay tuned to that calendar and to the updates that Sanaya and Deb and Joel and I are sending out. Um, and as always, reach out. Let us know if there are other topics you want to see for these Transit Tuesdays, and if there are other social events ideas that you want to see. We want to do more to bring the transit community together because together we can achieve some great things. So thank you to Ben and thank you everyone for being on. Um, have a great night.